I'm going to be brutally honest. We are losing the war on censorship, and we need to step up our game. Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai here. Today's video isn't your typical discussion. No, today I'm here for advocacy, to educate and encourage you guys to help out in the fight to ensure that our beloved anime and video games remain faithful to their source material. Not only that, we fight to ensure that the integrity of Japanese creators is preserved in the face of Western bias and scrutiny. I talk about censorship all the time on this channel, but this is probably going to be my most important video, as I'll be discussing how we can actually turn this trend around in our favor. Almost every single day, I wake up to find that some new work from Japan is getting censored or criticized for daring to have attractive waifu, or other themes that seem to clash with modern audiences. However, that's a fallacy. You and I are just as much a part of those modern audiences as the snowflakes who insist that fiction should dictate their worldview and promote their values. There used to be a time when anime dubs were praised for their originality. I think we've all got at least one anime we prefer in English. That said, the amount of content we're losing by giving localizers free rein far outweighs the few cases where a meme translation makes you giggle. If you're watching me now, odds are that you've been burned by censorship enough times that you're willing to forego the occasionally charming localization in favor of a more consistently accurate translation of the source material. If you haven't been burned badly enough, it's only a matter of time till something you want gets denied to you because someone completely unrelated decided it was offensive or in need of spicing up. Before I dive into the crux of the matter, don't forget to like, comment, share, and smash that subscription bell so you don't miss out on all my content. Consider supporting the channel by becoming a member here on YouTube or signing up for the exact same perks on either Patreon or Subscribestar. Members can get early access to videos and exclusive content like my Lessons in Magecraft series. For the purposes of this video, I've designated 4 sources of censorship. Consider them the 4 horsemen of censorship, vile bosses we can defeat with the right tactics. Horseman number 1 are what I call vocalizers and trendlaters, individuals who intercept our anime from Japan and change it according to their own sensibilities. Horseman number 2 are the corpos, companies or platform holders who dictate that anime censor itself to comply with their ESG score. Horseman number 3 are the colonials, viral ambassadors who reside in or are sent to Japan in order to train or otherwise advise anime creators how to censor themselves at the source. Horseman number 4 are various countries, politicians, or governmental agencies that demonize anime by banning it. Going forward, I plan to address each one and how we can take steps to oppose them. Let's start with the vocalizers or trendlaters. I use those names mockingly, and I apply them to any industry professionals who mangle anime for any reason, be it Puritan, progressive, or just plain inaccurate. Put bluntly, aside from the distribution of Japanese works, all we foreign fans actually need is a way to overcome the language barrier, and so we rely on translators to tell us what is being said. Some things are definitely hard to translate from Japanese to English, and it can take a skilled professional to truly convey things like nuance or humor. But this often opens the door for professionals to take things too far, changing not how something is said, but literally what is being said. Vocalizers let their ego get in the way of their job, and are given the power to change content rather than just translate it. There is no reason, ever, that an anime or game from Japan should look or sound any different when it's brought over to the West. Even in dubs, we shouldn't have to worry that the voice actors are portraying completely different characters than the Japanese seiyuu. Sadly, it happens all the time, though. Localization teams hire writers who use the Japanese script as a mere reference to create their own version. As such, if they think they're funnier than the Japanese writers, they'll add in memes or other pop culture references. If they think a character is being misogynistic or disrespectful, they'll erase anything that character says that they find offensive. Think about it. There was a genuine, living, breathing human being working for Nintendo Treehouse who looked at Tsubasa from Tokyo Mirage Sessions and thought, "Those little shadows around her waist are too sexual. Even though we've already aged her up to 18 in English, we can't allow the art to imply her shorts are that low on her waist." Of course, I can only guess at their reasoning behind that change, but the fact of the matter is that it didn't need to be changed at all. The same employee is probably responsible for having the Hot Springs DLC omitted from the Western release. The small changes are often indicative of the larger ones. Oftentimes, these vocalizers will justify their changes by claiming it's to benefit modern Western audiences, but in truth, they're really just imposing their own views on the work, painting over it like some kind of counterfeiting hack, when all we fans actually want is to know, as accurately as possible, what the characters on screen are saying. These people are fully aware of what they're doing, often taking to social media to brag about how they fixed or elevated the original. They bask in praise and block out any form of critique. That leads me to the important bit: how do we stop them? Thankfully, of the four horsemen, vocalizers are the easiest to oppose. We fight fire with fire, using social media the same way they do. The best thing we can do is point out their unnecessary changes each and every time we discover them. While we're generally pretty good about making the censorship known, we need to step it up and actually give our social media posts a purpose and a goal. We need to educate 3 targets simultaneously. We need to get the word out to as many people online as possible that a change has occurred. We need to let the company in charge know that the change isn't acceptable. And we need to let the person responsible for that change know we won't let their BS slide without notice. Whenever you see a bastardized localization, take a screenshot of it and juxtapose it with how it should look, i.e., take the original version and translate it the way it should be. Post that comparison online, tagging the publisher and the localization lead in charge of the project, while stating that what we got isn't authentic, and for that reason alone, it's unacceptable. Do this even if you have to use Google Translate. That's not to say Google is especially good at translation, or that teams should rely on machine translation, but even Google is able to point out that what localizers give us aren't even proper translations to begin with. In the case of Anna Kairistiona, she outs herself for butchering translations. For all intents and purposes, Anna here seems like a decent person, but her professionalism leaves much to be desired. And to be perfectly honest, I don't want people who think like her subtitling my anime. Recently, she tweeted out that she's the official English translator for Onimai, I'm Now Your Sister, an anime that's currently airing on Crunchyroll. Before I came across this tweet, I already knew people took issue with her translations because an earlier episode was caught erasing any references to femininity. Presumably, Anna saw a character talking about what it means to look and act girly, and took it upon herself to make the language gender neutral. This is extremely common in modern English vocalization, where references to womanhood are removed, whether it be from lines like, "Slaughter them all, even the women and children," or something like, "Girls aren't supposed to be so aggressive." I can only assume this is because vocalizers are either trans and are personally offended by the gendered language, or think they're doing trans people a favor by filtering the subtitles. Regardless, what they're giving us isn't an accurate translation. I hate to break it to you, but Japan still acknowledges and abides by traditional gender norms, and they're not evil for doing so. Heck, they're not even saying it's wrong to deviate from those norms. Even if a character's being a misogynistic douchebag, I still want them to be portrayed accurately. Even if this same character is appreciated in Japan, but hated by Westerners, I'd still prefer it stay accurate. Anyone who agrees with my sentiment and dares to ask Anna about why she omitted femininity in her subs gets blocked. Anyway, back to Anna's tweet. She claims that by deviating from the actual translation, she has elevated the show. She thinks her version is better than what the original creators had written, which is arrogant and untrue. Anna provides us with both the proper translation, as well as her final subs used on Crunchyroll. Let's look at the second example. In it, the main character is about to encounter a boss battle, but she really needs to pee. She doesn't have time to go to the bathroom, so she considers peeing into an empty bottle. The character's supposed to say, "It can't be helped, this is an emergency," but Anna changed it to, "I gotta do it, for the game." Clearly, what Anna claims is elevating the dialogue is just a meme. What is this, World of Warcraft? A For the Horde reference? If Japan wants to reference World of Warcraft or some other meme, they have every right, but I don't believe Anna should be allowed to inject that meme in an official capacity. It's the kind of joke I'd expect in a fansub or abridged series, but lately, fansubs have proven to be more accurate, which is really depressing. It's not supposed to be that way. Truthfully, Anna's erasure of femininity is worse than this innocuous meme, but the fact that she admits she thinks this is superior really bothers me. She's since gone on to protect her tweets, but at the time, there were people praising her for this, and it's clear her intent was to farm that praise. When I told her she was not, in fact, elevating the script, she blocked me. Unsurprising. As such, I feel no remorse in calling her out for this behavior. In cases like this, and for every example of vocalization you come across from anyone else, follow my example. Post your grievance on social media, tagging the company and culprit, along with receipts to show what was changed and what it should have been. This isn't harassment, but rather a legitimate criticism of someone's work. It's not a personal attack, but rather an attempt to fix the end result of the localization process. Hopefully the company will listen, and hopefully the localizer will embrace the feedback. At the very least, you're putting out your voice in a constructive, targeted manner, and the more people who do this exact thing for every example, the more likely a company will respond. Ideally, we should have a post like this for every single comment of praise the localizers get. I know we're out there. We just need to finally take action, not through bickering or trolling, but through pure, raw advocacy. I have faith in this system because it's produced results. 7Seas Entertainment is a company notorious for its butchered localizations of manga and light novels. Their work on Re:Zero and Mushoku Tensei are especially bad. Their most famous case, however, came with the manga I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl. Its original localization forced a trans interpretation on what was a yaoi cross-dressing romance. The protagonist self-identifies as a boy, while choosing to experiment dressing as a girl. At no point does he ever outright say he's becoming a woman, yet the localization refers to him with female pronouns, among other random changes. This was brought to light when Ethylene Scans, a manga review blog, pointed out the various differences between a proper translation of the text versus what 7Seas puked out. That blog gained traction, and enough of a ruckus was caused that 7Seas decided to re-release the manga with a more faithful translation. This is an extremely rare win for us anime fans. Now that Ethylene Scans has a review on the revised version of the manga, we can see what 7Seas should have put out to begin with. I love the result, because it proves that accurate translations both work and sound totally natural. People who are pro-localization often defend major changes by saying that a one-to-one translation doesn't exist, and that attempting to be accurate only results in a messy, unnaturally sounding product. Now, we can point to I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl as an example where it's far more accurate and doesn't read strangely at all. Turns out, changing something like a radio into a podcast isn't a necessary step to making a fluent translation. It's just an unnecessary change forced in to make a story seem more hip and cool. It's important to recognize the work put in by people like Ethylene Scans. By sitting down and doing their own translations, they're able to expose all the various ways vocalizers sneak their changes past us. Another valuable resource for me is Iuntue on Twitter, who very frequently provides comparison screenshots, many of which I've used in my videos. In the case of more nefarious vocalizers, they'll probably out themselves. Perhaps the most rightfully reviled vocalizer on the internet right now is Katrina. She frequently taunts fans and brags about her ability to inject memes like yeet, eye bleach, or resting bitch face into subtitles. It's no wonder that fans were worried about her working on the recent ports of Persona 3 Portable and P4 Golden. Atlus has been pressured into changing their content before, so I'm actually really surprised she didn't get away with changing anything here. I know this because the Persona series is still pissing off journalists who falsely interpret the games as homo and transphobic, even though they're totally not. Regardless, the fact still stands that Katrina's subs are not accurate. I have no problem with her as a person, but as someone who stands between me and my anime, I don't want her being a part of that process, since she continually refuses to just translate things as they are. So again, follow my lead and call her out on social media, being sure to tag her and her employer. All I'm saying is that her translations aren't accurate, and that I won't stand for them. Okay, so that definitely sounds like a Karen tier thread, but I honestly believe the best method of opposing vocalizers is to generate bad PR and bad publicity for these releases. It's an important step, regardless of whether or not you boycott a given product. Companies are too stupid to tell that the reason their sales are dropping is because of their localization. They're far more likely to see a drop in sales and assume people just don't like that anime or game. These same companies are dumb enough to sell games without advertising them, then wonder why their games didn't succeed. There's no way for them to measure the sales they could have had if their localization weren't so butchered. That is, unless you speak out and tell them with insane frequency why you can't support their stuff. Even if you do wind up buying a censored product, it's still worth voicing your displeasure. We need to make what happened with 7 Seas a common occurrence, until localizers start getting it right consistently. Until then, always remain skeptical. Look into any kind of altered content, either through translation or censored outfits and such. Whenever you find it, report it like I did, and if you see anyone else doing the same, give them a hand. If we really care about authentic anime and games, we need to be putting in the same effort as the wokalists and their avid simps. Don't even bother arguing with them. Focus your energy on who has the power, and bombard them with the truth that you as a fan don't want to support what the company is doing. That, of course, brings us to the second horseman, the corpos. By corpos, I'm referring to the likes of Sony, Steam, Nintendo, Google Play, Tencent, Hoyoverse, and even MasterCard. These companies hold distribution platforms and either ban or shadow ban content based on idealistic policies. Most of this is done in the name of ESG, or environmental social governance. It's an investment strategy where companies appeal to potential investors by touting how diverse and progressive they are. Mind you, having a company that helps lower its carbon footprint is great. I'm specifically referring to the S section, which normally deals in giving fair treatment to employees regardless of gender or race. While that alone is fine, many companies that deal in fictional media consider policing that media to be a part of their social responsibility. That's Sony's angle, with its vague family-friendly policy that has led to the censorship of visual novels and other anime games with sexual content. The hassle of working with Sony, specifically their US branch in California, is responsible for the fall of Senran Kagura. They may still release a game here or there, but its original creator left Marvelous because he could no longer make what he wanted to. Marvelous is now owned by Tencent, a Chinese company known for appeasing the National Press and Publication Administration. In other words, what the Chinese government considers to be morally unacceptable influences a lot of our media, not because China has a direct hand in foreign affairs, but rather because global companies are so desperate for China's money that they'll suckle China's golden teat. Thus, if you aren't being censored for not being progressive enough, you'll be censored by the other side of the political spectrum. Steam also forces anime games to be censored, implementing a system where developers can only submit games one time for approval. This pressures those devs to censor themselves, perhaps censoring more than they have to just to be safe. A game's age rating, be it through Apple, the Google Play Store, PEGI, Sero, or the ESRB, can also fuel censorship. Companies fear their games getting a mature rating, as it prevents them from being seen on homepages and recommendations. That's part of why Nikkei Goddess of Victory strives for a rating of 12+. It's also why Nintendo left Mai Shiranui out of Smash Bros., as her boobs alone would have bumped the game's rating higher in Japan. As such, for the sake of finances, devs might censor their works to fit a certain age rating. It all comes down to money. This is what happened when MasterCard put pressure on Pixiv. In their attempt to gain a global audience, Pixiv chose to comply with MasterCard because they thought that American revenue was worth more than their integrity. The problem with corpos is much trickier since money is the catalyst. Companies censor their works because they genuinely believe it's the better financial option. It's why I still use YouTube over other platforms, because it makes no sense for me to jump to another platform where fewer people would see me and I wouldn't be able to sustain myself. Our options to solve this aren't nearly as direct. We can only keep voicing our discontent while supporting companies that do things right. Whenever a company refuses to censor their products, they often do so at their own expense. For instance, when Korea's ratings board demanded that Blue Archive censor itself to keep its current rating, the game's president decided to instead let the age rating go higher. Keeping the game's content was considered more important than its rating, and as such, fans of Blue Archive should show their appreciation. Companies need to know that the fans they gain from keeping their integrity outweigh the potential audience they could reach through censorship. When it comes to games released on Steam, there are other ways to host and sell games, but they're obviously less popular. Sites like Manga Gamer may allow devs to go uncensored, but even then, it's still a more profitable move to stick with Steam. I understand that, but when a dev cares about its fans enough to release off-site uncensor patches, or to release multiple versions of the same game, I try to support their efforts. It's hard to tell a company that they can expect better returns by pleasing hardcore fans, especially if the numbers don't support that claim. It is relatively easy, however, to tell a company that you bought their game because they took the risk of leaving it uncensored. Bottom line, if you cherish something, support it, and thank creators whenever they create something you like. Make it worth their effort to use platforms that welcome their content, rather than demonize it. It's hard to do, since it demands we be super consumers, putting in way more effort than a casual fan would for works lucky enough not to be targeted for censorship. That said, it's a first world problem, and we have to vote with our voice and wallets. Next up is the third horseman, the colonials. I use this term loosely to refer to localizers who don't just intercept Japanese works en route to the West, but also travel to Japan or otherwise work with Japanese creators to make globally acceptable works from the onset. It's by far the most threatening force, as companies like Capcom, Nintendo, and Square Enix are actively listening to Western diplomats who lecture them on what they should and shouldn't be making. Capcom has employee training sessions that boast that their censorship of R-Mika in Street Fighter is a step in the right direction. This internalized wokeness has resulted in Jill from Resident Evil 3's remake wearing pants and shorts in lieu of an actual skirt. The same can be said for Tifa in Final Fantasy VII Remake. While I still adore Tifa, even in her remake design, Square Enix has publicly celebrated their internal ethics department, which employs people to scan through all their game's assets in order to veto anything problematic before it even makes it in. I've also heard Nintendo Treehouse sends its vocalizers overseas to advise Japan directly. Even if there isn't a specific person or department guiding a company's decisions, the pressure to conform to Western standards is still a threat. For example, Makoto Shinkai, creator of films such as Your Name and Weathering with You, recently stated in an interview that while he doesn't plan to change his way of doing things, he feels the pressure of things like the Me Too movement. The pressure is intense enough that Shinkai says if he were making Kimi no Na wa in today's political climate, he wouldn't have approved the scenes in which Taki fondles Mitsuha's breasts while in control of her body. It's not that Shinkai views the scene as genuinely inappropriate. Rather, he worries about what modern audiences would think of his work. In other words, he feels a pressure to bend the knee and let society interfere with his vision. Honestly, this scene is awesome and totally believable. It's not even glorifying or promoting Taki's behavior. The scene just shows that he, as a young man, would totally be tempted to fondle himself if he suddenly had his own breasts. His curiosity gets the better of him, and it's hilarious. Yeah, it's not his body when he does this, but Mitsuha also violates Taki's autonomy by spending his hard-earned money on parfaits and other cafe items. The whole point of this body-swapping mechanic is that these two have to learn to respect each other by conforming to each other's lifestyles. It takes time for them to learn from each other and establish a system that works when they swap bodies. The film would be way worse off if Shinkai removed this scene. That, and this is a fantasy scenario that has nothing to do with the Me Too movement. It has nothing to do with giving women the encouragement to confront their abusers. People are far too eager to let the real world interfere with their enjoyment of fiction. They're also too eager to let their fiction influence their daily lives. Thus, one solution to the problem is to remind Japanese artists that their works are awesome. Defend the rights for fiction to be fiction by holding individual people accountable for their actions. Even if we lived in a world where violent games made violent people, or non-consensual anime bred abusers, I still wouldn't blame escapist fantasy for the fact that some idiot thought it was okay to do in real life what they saw on TV. Shiro Tsunashima is the manga author for Jinroki Winvurga, a manga filled with violence and nudity. It's amazing, and I highly recommend it, but Shiro has faced pressure over the years from his own publishing magazine. Despite being encouraged to censor himself, he's pushed on with his manga, releasing 10 volumes in Japan. Luckily, with support from his fans, Shiro has been able to secure a new publisher for Winvurga so that he can continue the series. It wasn't that hard for me to find this guy and thank him for his great artwork. Even though Winvurga is only printed in Japan, I imported all 10 of his existing volumes and told him that Western fans appreciate him. It can be hard, especially with a language barrier, but it's totally worth contacting your favorite artists and letting them know you care. It can dispel this myth that Westerners are all screeching snowflakes who demand censorship. If vocalizers can go straight to the source, so can we. The modern audiences that they cater to are an illusion, the result of projecting one's isolated view onto the whole of society. Once again, we need to let the world know we're here and what we want. The last of the Four Horsemen refers to political structures that seek to ban anime. Various countries around the world have targeted anime as a problem, usually for its depiction of lowly characters, but honestly, that censorship has no limits. As I mentioned before, China is a key player in all of this. While Chinese companies have gotten away with some beautiful stuff like this game, Bloody Spell, they've also been responsible for some of the most pedantic censors out there. As to how one of these gets approved but the other doesn't is a mystery to me. Regardless, when the CCP makes demands, the rest of the world complies because they want China's precious money. Thankfully, in most cases, this censorship remains isolated to China itself. But what if you live there and don't agree with the government? This same dilemma affects anime fans in the UK and Australia, as these nations view anime and its sexual antics to be detrimental to the moral integrity of society. It's gotten so bad that retailers like J-List, who specialize in selling adult novelties, can no longer ship to Australia without having their products confiscated during customs. The UK also has scenes removed from anime broadcasts, such as a recent example from Battle Girls Time Paradox Episode 3, which depicts a girl's butt in the bathtub. Let's be real, this kind of thing has been in anime for over 50 years now. It really shouldn't be blamed for any injustices that have occurred in that time. If you have any ability to vote where you live, consider investigating a candidate's views on fictional media. I said anime censorship is a first-world problem, but this is where it becomes more important. When politicians throw blame at fiction, they're looking for an easy scapegoat rather than addressing actual issues. Political forces should address real-world concerns. When social services respond to complaints about fictional characters, their time and funding gets wasted, while real humans suffer. The UN, for instance, should address its own allegations of abuse and assault long before it has any say regarding whether lolly anime counts as CP. Ultimately, what I want is to put a stop to censorship. I want to create a world where something beautiful like this isn't associated with cultural appropriation or the internment of native tribes. It's beautiful artwork that the whole world deserves to see. I want a world where these kinds of designs are always available to players who want them. I want a world where shots like this aren't controversial, and even if they are, their creators have the guts and financial backing to release them anyway. I never want to see words like Chad, sus, or poggers in official subtitles. Artists should be allowed to create their art and distribute it across the globe without changes. The process of localization should simply be the process of overcoming the language barrier, and not used as an opportunity for middlemen to interfere with an artist's vision. If I were to summarize how to achieve this kind of world, I would say to constantly maintain a voice. Do not let censorship apologists and supporters have the last say. Each and every time you find censorship, call it out, targeting that frustration at the companies and individuals responsible. Make it clear that you are their target audience, and if they want your money, they need to fix their bullshit. If you love an artist's work, go and let them know not to cave in. Do not let the rest of Twitter represent who modern audiences are. Lying low and saying, "This is why anime should never have gone mainstream," won't help anymore now that the Japanese are no longer able to produce art without global interference. When a company does the right thing, praise and support them for taking a stand against censorship. Prove to them they've made the right decision, with both your money and your words. Boycotting isn't the most effective means of protest, as companies aren't smart enough to realize a drop in sales is due to how they released a product. They'll assume the worst, thinking the very property itself is a dud. Even if you boycott or pirate your anime, the most important step is getting out there and letting companies know why you don't support them. The negative PR this can generate does have the power to force companies to comply. It just has to be targeted at the right people without harassment. When it comes to your own government imposing censorship, consider who you support when elections come around. A politician's stance on fiction may seem unimportant, but you need to remember that a political figure who tries to solve problems by policing fiction is diverting resources away from a proper solution to society's problems. All of this boils down to my motto: celebrate your fandom. Become a voice of many that counteract the forces censoring the anime we love. Thanks for watching!
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
celebrate your fandom!
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Release Trash for Skinco, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Omagoden, Free Brick, RNG or Shuffles 1498, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Link Pendrago, King Kobo, Observer Bellis, Flash Daniel, Eldon Yarbrough, Horsemen of Justices, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Matthew McAfee, Game King 352, Caitlin P, Vladimirovna, Succubus Sakura, Jonathan Padua, The Taz 96, President Irina Vladimirovna Putina, Maxwell's Demon, Kengo X77, SF Giants Fan Mike, Akakaze Yume, and user C100CAD1. Thank you all so much.